Good morning, everyone, and thank you immensely for joining today's webinar. On behalf of everyone here at Apprentice, I hope you and your families are well and safe through all of this. And we're incredibly excited today to share with all of you a story of 2020 and a story of what this industry has accomplished. And the stories that you'll hear today are through some of the biggest market leaders in this space, and from a group of people that I'm incredibly proud and happy to be working with on a day in and day out basis. And I'm incredibly excited to share with all of you on this webinar today a bit of a retrospective, a bit of a story, a bit of a tell all about what this industry accomplished last year. Because I really do believe that what the men and women in this industry have done is beyond remarkable and frankly, borderlines miracle in terms of what was accomplished last year and trying to not only solve COVID with COVID around us, but also too, keeping the global drug supply chains open last year was beyond incredible. And so today we're going to be talking through those stories, and I have a number of folks here on the call with me today that I am very happy to share with you for the participants that are joining in. And before we get into that, I just want to introduce myself and Apprentice for those of you that may be new to what we do and what we focus on. But my name is Angelo Stracotanio. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Apprentice.io. You can find out more about us on our website at www.apprentice.io. But we built out a intelligent software platform specifically for life science manufacturing that is meant to usher in the next wave of Pharma 4.0 principles, and to not just have it be theory, but to move it into practice, to truly leverage these tools and these technologies to help usher in the next wave of therapies coming to market. And a lot of the folks that we have here on the webinar today are going to be talking about that, how we've now taken this new and emerging tech that, just even a few years ago was just frankly a principle, a theory, a concept, and how then these principles and theories and concepts have been deployed at a scale that is unbelievable. And I'm excited to share with all of you what those folks have accomplished this last year and where then the future of all this technology goes. Because I really truly believe that what this industry has not only accomplished last year, but I think we've all learned during COVID how unbelievably critical this industry is, because especially many of us, myself included, are still sitting at home waiting for this industry to finish production. And so to take all of that and to now move this into the future for billions of people around the world that are relying on the therapies that many of the folks on this call have made is really an exciting topic and one that I can't wait to share. So with that, I will, without further ado, introduce my panelists here today for today's roundtable. And so we have a great collection of folks who are joining us from across the industry that represent some of the largest and most important life science manufacturers out there. And so I'm very excited to have you hear their story and have you hear their journey. And so I'm just going to go in order of what appears here on the webinar. But I'd love you to just introduce yourself and your company, especially for folks that we've invited that are outside of life sciences. But if you want to just give a quick introduction about yourself, your team, and your organization, I think it'd be great to set the stage for today's webinar. So I'm actually going to start with you, Joe, because you're left on my screen here in no particular
Perfect.
order, but I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Angelo. So I'm Joe Montano, the Director of Global Customer Experience here for Catalent. So Catalent, for those of you who don't know, is a contract provider of advanced delivery technologies, development, and manufacturing solutions for drugs, biologics, and cell and gene therapies, and consumer health products as well. We have over 85 years serving the industry, and Catalent employs more than 16,000 people. Actually, we've added 2,000 people to our organization even during COVID, and that includes more than 3,000 scientists and technicians at more than 45 facilities around the globe. So that's just a little bit about our company.
That's great. I can't believe you guys added that many on this last year.
It's incredible.
That is remarkable. Noble, you're up next.
Sure. Thank you, Angelo. So my name is Noble Vale, and I work at Bristol Myers Squibb, a large biopharmaceutical company. We have over, I believe, 30,000 employees all around the world. And I'm in a group called Engineering Technologies, and we've been able to look to leverage technologies such as Apprentice during this whole pandemic to optimize work and be able to continue what we have to do during these tough times.
That's awesome. And Douglas, welcome.
Yep. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Douglas Arnold. I'm with Merck or MSD, depending on where you're located. So we're Merck in the Americas and MSD ex-US. I'm a client service leader, so I partner with my business folks. I actually sit in the IT organization, and I help drive innovation and change within our organization.
That's great. And speaking of folks around the world, I'd like to welcome Su Lin, who is joining from Malaysia.
Thank you, Angelo. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. I'm Su Lin Lee. I am the product director for manufacturing workflow product within GSK. So specifically, the business unit that I primarily serve are pharma supply chain, which is basically our manufacturing sites across the globe. So GSK is a pharmaceutical company combined with also consumer healthcare and vaccines businesses as well, with over 100,000 employees globally. Yep.
Incredible. And then Zach, you're not so far away, but Zach, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Zach Gendron. I recently started a new position here at Elevate Bio, where I'm the Associate Director of Automation Engineering. Elevate's a new startup in the cell and gene therapy space, where they've got an interesting model of kind of being a incubator for some research organizations, as well as launching their own products and bringing companies in. But that wasn't who I was with when I agreed to this conference here. I was actually with Sanofi in Framingham, Massachusetts, leading the automation for the clinical trial manufacturing of their mammalian cell culture lines in Framingham. I've been there for about 6 years altogether, 12 with Sanofi, and so mostly I'll be speaking about how Sanofi really pivoted and transitioned here this last year with Apprentice's help.
That's great. And for the webinar folks, first of all, welcome to everybody on the call, and a big thank you on behalf of Apprentice to participate in this today. But to set the stage for what we're going to talk about, because in a minute we'll get into the actual roundtable itself. But to set the stage here is that the collection of folks that we have here on the call went through an absolute remarkable journey last year, because as you've heard in their introductions, these are some of the largest organizations on planet Earth. And not only are they some of the largest organizations on planet Earth, what these folks here on the call were responsible for last year and what their teams accomplished and how they used this technology was really incredible. And I'm excited to have them share a lot of those stories. And so to set the stage for what this webinar will be about, I just want to share a little bit more about Apprentice, because what you'll be hearing is certain bits of terms and terminology throughout all of this. And so I just want to set the stage for what you'll be hearing on today's webinar. So first of all, Apprentice, like I mentioned, has an intelligent software platform specifically for life sciences. We designed this system to help usher in the next therapies that all of these companies here on the call are currently working on and working aggressively to help the billions of patients around the world that need it. But we specifically designed our platform to have two major components, and today we're going to be focusing on one of those. So generally speaking, the core of our platform is a full-blown, what we're calling intelligent batch execution system. It's analogous to a classic manufacturing execution system. But what we believe in very deeply here at Apprentice is that at the core of process execution is collaboration. I think we have greatly and deeply learned throughout this pandemic that collaboration is at the heart of how we as human organizations go about and execute on the massive challenges that we face today. And so what we're going to be focusing on is one of our modules that we call Tandem. And so you'll be hearing this word tandem thrown around a lot throughout today's conversation. And what Tandem is a remote collaboration tool that was specifically designed for the workflows, the collaborative workflows within life sciences. And what I mean by that is you can use this technology, and specifically, by the way, it's been designed around head-worn devices. So you'll be hearing a lot of things around head-worn devices, mobile devices, and augmented reality in today's presentation. But how these folks then leveraged head-worn devices, smart glasses, and AR to then allow for collaboration at a global scale last year is really what the focus of today's presentation will be. So with that, Morgan, if you don't mind, let's get into it, and we'll happily then talk about how this technology and these principles was then used to solve some awesome challenges last year. So to set the stage for those challenges, let's talk through what some of those were, because right away, all of us were thrust into a moment that was unprecedented in all of our lives. And so what I'd love to do is help the viewers here in the webinar understand what was going on almost immediately into this pandemic, where all of a sudden, all of our teams who were used to typically going through and working by flying to solve problems and packing up suitcases and heading on over and doing some tech transfers, help us understand what all of a sudden happened here and what challenges were both immediately faced, but also too strategically, how are your organizations then looking at and trying to even wrap your arms around the challenges that were going on. And so what I'd love to do, because again, this is the first part of the demo, I'd love to hear the audience, hear these folks from around the industry here. I'm just going to go around the room and have potentially each of us share, what some of those challenges were, and to really set the context and stage so that people understand what was going on the inside of these companies last year. So with that, Joe, you're still first up on my list. So Joe, I'll hand it over to you.
Sounds great. So for us, we at the start, right, it was February, March of 2020, seems like forever ago. For us, we immediately assessed our workforce and sent.
Did you guys just lose Joe?
Yeah.
Yep.
Joe.
Yeah.
His audio just dropped off.
Yep. Morgan?
He can't.
And we just lost Joe. So we'll have Morgan take a look here with some technical difficulties. But sorry, Joe, you just cut out there for a moment. Are you back with us? Not yet. So on the right-hand side, there's a little bit of a My Devices where you can choose your microphone. But while you're going through that, Zach, I'll turn it over to you because
Sure.
A year later now, you're in a new company, a new location, even a new conference room. But set the stage for what was going on in February and March of last year.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we kind of got a sense something was happening. Being in the Boston area, we had a quick slap of reality with what had happened with the Biogen conference and a super spreader event. So we were all gearing up for it. We knew it was going to happen. We knew it was going to come down and the offices would be shut down. We started talking about everybody make sure you take your laptop home every night with the charger. We don't know when we're going to just be locked out, essentially. And then sure enough, it happened, right? And at first it was a bit of a breath of fresh air, because it was like, okay, we got a week to get caught up on email and all this other stuff, and all that big project work has to go on hold for a little bit. But we didn't really expect it to just continue on, right? At first it was like, okay, we're going to do this for a week or two and it'll give us a little break, and then we'll be right back into it, right? We were in the middle of commissioning a skid, a fill finish line from a vendor in Germany. And, we're just like, okay, we can take a breath and get caught up on some of the punch list items around that and not try to rush through your protocols. And so that's where we were at first. And then it just kind of kept going, and you're like, wait a minute, this is going the other direction. 2 weeks is not anywhere near enough. It's still ramping up. There's still, right, everybody's shutting down. It's expanding beyond the coast cities. All the cities are starting to shut down. And that's when we really had to kick it into high gear and be like, okay, how are we going to tackle this problem? And that's where, it just took everybody. All right, let's evaluate who are the critical employees to keep the lights on, keep things going, and starting down a list of who needs to be on site, who doesn't need to be on site, how can we get people on site, how can we maintain distance, how can we mask everybody, what cleaning do we need to do, what procedures do we need to have in place to even bring somebody in. It was just kind of a redo everything about going to work and reevaluate what's really critical. And so that's how we started. I can keep going. We can keep talking about it, but I figure that's probably a good breaking point for hearing how everybody else started out too.
And just to follow up on that very quickly, again, for the folks that aren't familiar with life sciences, so you were right in the middle of commissioning a new fill finish line. And so just very briefly talk about like what it's like pre-COVID with in terms of the resources flying in from Germany, flying out to Germany. There was huge amounts of things because we were working with you on it. So I know, but you want to share about like life pre-COVID because that was about to immediately change.
Yeah, absolutely. So pre-COVID, we had the vendor coming in whenever we had a problem with the equipment because we're still starting it up, right? It was a newer piece of equipment. We had issues. As soon as something went wrong, get a phone call. Yep, okay, we'll be there in a week. We'll line it up, figure it out. Vendor shows up. We get the problem resolved. Vendor might be on site for a week, and that's how we were operating. That was the fastest way for us to get problems resolved. Was bring in the experts, have them be at the equipment, and resolve the issue right there. And of course, even later into the pandemic, international travel was just not happening. So that immediately cut off that resource for us. And this was a place where we had actually started using the apprentice system a little bit for some of this troubleshooting early on with our equipment, where we would put it on, walk around the equipment with the vendor, and the vendor could be at their computer in Germany and help us resolve some smaller issues, short time frame issues, rather than having them fly over for 1 hour and servicing something. So we had to expand that almost immediately, and for a much longer period of time than we expected, because the international travel bans were significant. And then even if you could travel, the quarantine requirements made it very difficult. So yeah, they could get here, but then they'd have to be in a hotel room for 2 weeks before they could be on site. And then when they flew back, they'd have to be in a hotel room on that end for 2 weeks before they could go back to work, right? So that employee loses a month of doing anything just by traveling internationally. So that just wasn't feasible for, both from a cost standpoint as well as a efficiency standpoint. So we had a lot of practice with operating virtually and resolving issues virtually and being the hands for the operators or the experts in Germany to execute changes and make adjustments and keep the lights on and keep the equipment running.
Absolutely. And you're going to hear this theme throughout because, I see a lot of folks smiling here on the call because that moment, that challenge, that overall, like, wait, we used to do it in a radically different way just a few weeks ago, is really the theme that you'll hear across the group here. So Joe, is Mike back?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's back. Great.
Excellent.
All right.
Excellent.
So Joe, tell us about Catalent. What was going on to it and how are you guys, what happened and how did you start to identify a lot of this right away?
Yeah, for us, back in March of 2020, we identified those who could work from home, work remotely. We sent about 30% of our workforce, and actually to this day, we probably have still 25% of our workforce that's working remotely. So we've had to leverage that virtual technology. We were lucky in the sense that we used a people process technology framework, and we found that one of our sites, our Kansas City site, actually it was piloting the apprentice hardware software for since 2015. So what we did was identify that, hey, that's working really well to keep connected with customers, with vendors, with our instrument vendors as well, and we scaled that up. So we started a process to roll that out to now more than 35 of our sites around the network. So 12 different countries, 4 continents. So it's been actually an incredible kind of journey to see what things we could learn on changing people's workflows, as well as maintaining. I mean, we do at Catalent something like 500 audits a year for all of our facilities around the world. So we needed to maintain that. We needed to keep our tours. So one of the primary things that we that kind of gives our customers trust that we can manufacture their drug product or consumer products is that trust, right? They want to be able to see our manufacturing facilities, see our manufacturing trains, and talk with our operations staff. And that's what we were able to do and scale the capability. I'm sure we'll get into some of the learnings, but that was what was going on in March, April, May of 2020 here.
Yeah, and for those of you again that are outside the industry that are joining the webinar, Catalent had a extra special layer of complexity because they manufacture on behalf of their customers. And so not only were they trying to do things like Zach, where they're troubleshooting, they're working, they're operating, but then they have a massive layer of complexity on top of that, which is all of their customers that they're working with that are some of the most important companies out there and folks we have here on the call, that they can continue to build that trust and continue to operate remotely and be able to work with the operations staff without having to physically be there, which I think in and of itself added a whole extra layer to this whole thing.
And
so speaking of that extra, what's that?
Oh, sorry, and including regulators too. We'll
and
get
regulators
to that as well.
Yeah.
But it's been fantastic.
Oh my gosh. And so it's talking about it at a massive scale. Douglas, I'd love you to introduce yourself next and really set the stage for Merck, because Merck, huge organization at a global scale with many sites, or literally 6 different continents, so set the stage for you guys too.
Sure. And as you mentioned, Angelo, and I think I forgot this in my introduction, right? So, I mean, we're clearly a, worldwide, company. We've got facilities, we have over 50 manufacturing facilities, including our, human health, animal health, manufacturing capabilities around the world, from Singapore to Brazil. I mean, you name it, we've got locations, globally. We've got over 70,000 employees in our organization. So there's a lot that we need to do to keep people connected, collaborating, and working, on a regular basis. We were actually pre-pandemic, right at the point where we were bringing our remote assist business case to our sponsors. So we had been working for several years, proving out the capability, doing usability studies. Our core focus was on time to diagnosis, right? So, manufacturing organization, we need to fix problems fast, right? Because if something is broken, we can't get product out the door. So we really focused on that, right? And we actually had a vision statement of, could we get a person in the room with the problem within an hour, right? Because previously, we would send people around the world. So if you needed to go to Singapore, you need to go to Brazil, wherever, it could take 17 to 26 hours just of travel time to get there. So we had set out that goal. We had done some proof of concepts experiments. We had actually deployed to a series of sites where we were basically demonstrating and proving out the use case. And then the pandemic, I mean, like I said, we were getting ready to bring our business case forward to say, all right, here's our 24-month plan to now roll this capability out to all of our facilities. And then the pandemic hit, right? And we were actually asked then to deliver that capability within less than 8 months or whatever the time frame was. But so we were at essentially had to go from a 24-month roadmap to this is do it now kind of thing. And within that 8-month period, we were able to expand to every single manufacturing facility that Merck runs. We also extended it to external manufacturing facilities, so our partners. So it was a pretty fast and wild we called it the acceleration internally. But it was cool because we were pre-positioned to be able to do that. So I mean, I don't look at the pandemic as something that it helped us, but we were already down that digital transformation journey, and it just gave us the extra electricity to kind of move it forward faster.
That's great, and that's a perfect segue into our next topic after Sulin and Noble introduce themselves, because this shock and compression is really what we're going to talk about next. Because what Merck's team and Catalent's team and Sanofi's, all these teams did was they had to compress all these timelines to deploy a brand new technology, really, really rapidly. And so, Sulin, it's a perfect segue to you, because you also were on this journey pre-pandemic, and then just like Douglas, all of that changed. So we'd love to hear from you, how GSK was operating, and then all of a sudden, all of that changed. I think because it's a super interesting story.
Yeah, definitely. I think before the pandemic itself, we have already started with a project on industrializing the apprentice solution, typically the tandem solution, to all our sites. But it was a project, right? So how project runs, and typically it takes it can be 6 months, 9 months, depending on how long it takes for you to qualify systems before you can launch it in an organization at our scale. But all of a sudden, when the pandemic hit, we were literally just like, we need to provide remote assist capability to our manufacturing sites, because for us, more office-based, the impact on us is actually less. But the new problems that actually were surfaced by our business, especially in the manufacturing sites, were how can we get the experts to support and assist our operators or technicians on the ground? How can we allow second checks to be done remotely? It's everything about remote. How can we do it remotely and allow our employees to actually maintain social distancing? And it was from that time onwards that I kind of knew that we were on something very different, because you literally, like, what timeline? You don't really have a timeline. It's like, get it out as soon as possible. And the kind of pressure that you were getting was almost every single day or every alternate day, you will get a message from your leaders on, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Where are we now? What help do you need? It's like everybody was just jumping in, trying to help us remove any blockers that we may have, to allow us to actually launch that as soon as possible. So it was really as soon as possible. There was no timeline. There was no 3 months. There was no 6 months. It was just like, get it out there, into use first, and then we'll sort out whatever that was not sorted before. So it was crazy. I think we basically started off with quite a big blast of sending out the devices to the sites, working with the apprentice together. And now that we basically have over 120 devices across over 30 locations, and then we slowly expand that into, apart from R&D and manufacturing, also into vaccines, and in our facility group, our audit group as well. So it kind of scaled after that, but the initial phase was just crazy.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And I vividly remember that compressed timeline that you guys had. And the same thing happened at BMS as well. Just like actually everybody here on the call, we were already kind of working towards a goal and already beginning to implement these Pharma 4.0 principles, remote assist principles, all these different things. And then wham, it all changed. So Noble, do you want to set the stage for BMS?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Angelo. So in BMS, we looked at the apprentice technology back in, I think, around 2018. So we set the stage for this whole COVID situation, where we evaluated the Tandem application and a couple other applications that Apprentice provides, and then 2020 hit, March hit, and lockdown just happened really fast. I remember the week of lockdown, I actually was supposed to fly out to a conference, and I literally canceled that flight 2 days before. Everything hit the fan, and we just had to go into lockdown. And in BMS, we had a strict policy of people only really critical personnel would be on site that are responsible for the manufacturing of our assets. And right away, there was a need of the idea that everyone else talked about, having your eyes and ears somewhere remotely somehow. And it started out in my specific department, in product development, drug product, where we were piloting this technology, and it soon ballooned to other groups in the organization, which include biologics, cell therapy, auditing, manufacturing, science and technology. All these groups coming in, when they heard about the use of this technology, wanted to hop on. And we were fortunate that we did a lot of initial vetting with our IT and other business leaders, because it got us to that point where we were enabled to perform the remote collaboration, where we had some of those acceptances in place. And granted, at the same time, a lot of these timelines were very expedited, and we're still working on formal acceptance of various parts of the technology as of today. But we've shown from the business side the extreme benefit that it has shown, whether it's internally within our BMS sites, domestically in the United States, internationally in Europe, or even our contract manufacturers that are around the US and around the world. We were able to work with a lot of our contract manufacturers in the months during the pandemic, where we provided them with the technology. Apprentice was a great help in getting the devices, equipment, and training to these sites and these groups to make this work very seamless. And many people from our internal sites in the US and Europe are very grateful to be able to have their eyes and ears in a process that has very tight timelines for manufacturing or different studies that we have to perform. And we were able to not break those timelines due to the fact that we were able to implement the Apprentice technology. So it's been a huge benefit. And I believe in the beginning of the pandemic, we had around maybe 30 to 40 devices, and now that's ballooned to over 100. So it's definitely been a very crazy thrill ride throughout this whole pandemic to get this technology out there.
And what a perfect segue talking about the thrill ride, because I remember my personal last trip to a customer was actually Joe's site over in 10 minutes from me in Somerset, because I could no longer fly. I was grounded, but I was still able to head over to Somerset, New Jersey to see Joe. But let's talk about the thrill ride and the shock of it all, because, like we said, we were working on, all of you guys were working on this timeline, working on this journey, and then wham, this thing hit. And to quote Sulin here, there were no timelines. It was just go faster, which is pretty remarkable. So what I want to talk about next is what your teams did, because I got to see it, I got to feel it. And so let's talk through the logistics of deployment. How did this thing happen? How did you identify the sites? How did you identify the people? And then ultimately, how did you coordinate with your teams to actually deploy this technology? Because again, for the new folks on the call watching the webinar, that this is a fairly new and emerging tech. This is something that's never been done before. And so you had to not only figure out how do you deploy software quickly, you had to figure out how to deploy a new technology and software quickly. So, would love to have that as our next topic here, because I think that story in and of itself of the how, not just the what this thing did, the how is incredibly interesting too. So we'll do another roundtable again, and Joe, I'll start with you. You want to talk through how did this whole thing get rolled out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we certainly had a process for prioritizing which sites we would send our devices to, and not to mention actually ensuring that infrastructure. So making sure this is common, I think, amongst all of the folks on the call today. The infrastructure needs to be there. So our Wi-Fi needs to be consistent across the facility. So coordinating with our IT teams to make sure that we did necessary improvements, all of our sites are basically big metal boxes inside other big metal boxes. So the Wi-Fi traditionally doesn't really work well there. So making sure that that's well set up in advance so that infrastructure can work. And then Apprentice, so Angelo, your teams, and making sure that the training and the devices were sent to our facilities in incredible time period, and making sure that we could get it to our international sites as well was fantastic. And then making sure that we set up training to have folks understand how to use the technology, how to best utilize it within collaboration spaces between devices, and then how to bring our far end participants into those. It's very simple, easy to use, but like anything else, requires a little bit of understanding some of the nuances there. I think some of the other things that we had to consider was, we have this Overton window of time, right? People are disrupted in terms of their workflow, so making sure we took advantage of that and to introduce this technology as a way to keep business running, keep things moving forward. That's been especially impacted here, and that it goes from kind of the paper business case to like, how can you do it faster? So definitely heard it from each of the individuals on the call here. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, and speaking of that, so I know my whole team is watching, and a shout out to Matt, because Matt literally during the pandemic, he is recently engaged, living in a small apartment with his fiance, and had stacks and stacks and stacks of boxes and devices and everything, because as we were shipping to you, we were dealing with the pandemic ourselves. And so it was a pretty wild moment. And just, I really shout out to Matt's fiance for one, still being his fiance, but two, really just providing the leeway because of the insane logistics that we had deploying out to your sites. Because I think that thread of not just logistics, but also infrastructure. Also, infrastructure is a common theme across, I know at a personal level, a common theme across this entire group. And so, Zach, do you want to share some of that as well? Because, as you guys started to deploy, we ran into some of those networking challenges, and it was real. That's the real things that happened. And, happy to, love you to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The infrastructure challenges were difficult, right? I don't work within the IT organization. I'm in engineering, and our IT organization works at a global level, right? So we quickly realized we had some real Wi-Fi challenges in our building, and that our infrastructure was not quite where we all had presumed it was. And that's because you're not doing a lot of Zoom meetings in the suite, or doing any heavy Wi-Fi within the manufacturing space, or maybe in your mechanical rooms or your electrical rooms. On top of that, we discovered that, some Wi-Fi refresh projects had been kicked down the road, and we were still running on 2.4 in a few buildings, and didn't have 5 gigahertz in some of our buildings. So we quickly realized those challenges, and were able to reprioritize some of those projects that kept getting kicked down the road, And the beauty of that was it's now setting us up for all this other wireless IoT. There is so much more technology that's going to be pushed, and so by identifying our Wi-Fi issues through this need through Apprentice, we realized just how much our infrastructure was lacking in some places. And then on top of that, we had other issues where IT actually shut down our access to Apprentice accidentally for a period of time with a new VPN project. And that was a bigger challenge because we didn't even know who to talk to about that. And just even finding the right resources within an organization, the size of Sanofi was difficult for site level access and operation, because all those guys were running around trying to find out the right person too, and nobody was in the office anymore. But what we were able to do was we had used the application. We'd been using it since 2017, so I at least was familiar with it. What quickly transpired was word of mouth within the organization that we had a way to support operations remotely. And we quickly jumped from about 20 or 30 users to well over 200 or 300 users in a 2 or 3 month period. And Apprentice could essentially drop ship devices. I'd receive them sometimes at home, sometimes in the office, be able to configure them for our Wi-Fi infrastructure, and then drive around and drop them off to different sites that needed them. And the beauty of the application is it's all cloud-based, right? So there's nothing to install locally. There's nothing to do on that side of it. You can manage users, manage groups, all through the cloud, and then you can just connect it as simply to your Wi-Fi guest network, and you're off and running. So the learning curve is it's pretty easy to get used to it, and a lot of it was trial by fire for some of the operators, because couldn't really do in-person learning. So here's your headset. Here's a quick cheat sheet on how to get it running, and go. And that's what we did. We launched it across multiple business units within the organization, like a lot of the other folks, and couldn't hold their hand through the support. It just wasn't enough time to do that. So, but that's where Apprentice also came in and helped us with training and getting people going on it. So it worked out well.
Yeah, it's incredible. I remember the VPN situation vividly. I remember folks on our team calling you when you were literally driving to the different sites. Where Zach is like the last mile. He works for DoorDash, dropping off some devices. But then Douglas, talk about infrastructure at the extreme. We were dealing with this then at a global, massive scale last year, and I'd love to hear from you some of the big key learnings and challenges, especially because you talked about that timeline that was supposed to be 24 months, which got compressed into less than 8, and to really kind of learn from some of those experiences, let's call them, as we are rolling this out literally across the globe.
Sure. Yeah, and just to link back to the previous conversation, so I don't repeat too much stuff, but I mean, from our perspective, we did have standard work in place, right, as we were executing this, right? So we had a standard process. We wanted to be able to document the use case, why we needed to use, the remote collaboration or the tandem application for the specific activity. We would then move into, very quickly identifying the required people, and then Angelo, what you were just talking about, the next step is just, confirming that we've got the minimum network requirements. So as other folks have already spoken about, most of the facilities were not designed to stream, live video from the shop floor. So we had to work through that. So that was standard part of our process. We were working with some facilities that only had a 10 megabit connection coming into the facility. Not an ideal situation. And then we would work, after confirming the minimum, network requirements, doing site onboarding, and then having a deployment day, and then kind of getting folks going. The key for some of that for us was we identified what we called a digital champion for each of those areas that we were engaging in at a site level. And then we worked very closely with that digital champion to navigate the site, the key individuals, so we can then, get things, moving as we needed. I'd also highlight that during this time, the other thing that really expanded was that use case piece. Right. So when I mentioned earlier, we started off with just time to diagnose a problem. Can we get someone in a room within an hour? And then quickly during that time period, We were now being asked to do factory acceptance testing. We were being asked to do second person verification. We were being asked to do audits. We were being asked to, bring in external regulators to look at our facilities. So there was a host of things that we needed to figure out that weren't really even part of our original plan during this time period. And then Angelo, like you said, we're a worldwide company. A lot of the activity that we were, we have facilities in Asia Pacific, South America, around the globe. So, we were having challenges, working with the bandwidth ex-US. I think Europe was pretty fine, and this is where the partnership, as we were working through things, Angelo, and I know we were on many calls, that we need.
Just a few.
The value of the product and the value of the experience all comes down to that video quality feed. There's more to it than that. There's the other capabilities that are provided as part of the Tandem application, like the high definition screenshots, other things that you can use when there is a low bandwidth situation. But we had to work really closely together to start building up, better networking capabilities, not only inside Merck, but I think, Angelo, if you want to talk about what you had to go through, to make sure we were getting that right level of video stream.
Yeah, it's a great segue, because we as a company were learning at the same time and scaling at the same time you guys were as well. And the challenges that we faced internally at, again, a global scale, what we like to say is that, we have an emerging tech product, right? And pre-pandemic, there were the early adopters, which are the folks here on the call, people that were very forgiving and patient with some of this new tech. And then overnight, wham, it was the early majority that was demanding this thing be performant at sites that had 10 megabit connections. And for those of you that aren't IT folks, that is wildly less than your cell phone. So we had to figure out how do we do this, and how does Apprentice install the infrastructure in order to handle all of this. And during the summer of last year, my team was literally working 7 days a week till 3 a.m. at night, trying to figure out, and then getting on the phone with many of you in the morning, trying to figure out how do we solve some of these challenges. But together we did, and it's not just Apprentice. This took all of us, not just the folks on the call here, but all of our customer base to solve some of that, because it was crazy. It's not just the stories of Matt with the boxes in his home. It's all of my engineers working around the clock to solve some of these things. And GSK was no different. So Sue Lynn, do you want to share about that? And then also, just in the interest of time, I love this conversation. We can keep going for 2 more hours. But also, Douglas did a great job of interjecting some of the use cases, because once this got deployed, this then moved into the new normal. The new normal of like, hey, we actually can operate. We actually can continue to do this. And through this tech, we can actually solve some real, tangible, legitimate things. So love for you to share some of that, Sue Lynn, and then we'll have the Noble, of course, share as well.
Yeah, sure. I think the challenges that have been highlighted by others are very similar to what we face in GSK when we roll it out as well. The approach we took was very similar. We identified like super users. Typically, we start off with like tech people at those sites, just so that they are more familiar with technology, that they can, easier for them to get used to the devices and all this, and then go on and train their other users at the sites and embed the technology at the site, basically. And the use cases wise basically expand from exactly what Douglas was saying, from remote assist to something breakdown, we need to get remote support, to become tech transfer. So we actually had, some key milestones because we were right in the middle of some tech transfer from R&D to pharma supply chain for manufacturing at that time. So typically we would have fly people from, US to Italy, for example, to sit with the receiving manufacturing sites, go through the process. They would stay there for 2 to 3 weeks, complete the tech transfer, they fly back to US, and suddenly travel restricted. So what this technology actually has enabled them to do is actually to be able to do the tech transfer remotely by sending the glasses over to Italy, so that they would do the tech transfer from the sending end to the receiving end, and then do the vice versa of the reverse shadowing as well. And that worked out very well on that process. And I think post that, we also have like FATs, SATs, some equipment commissioning, some IQ, OQ process. Typically, everything that we used to do physically, face to face, whether it's within a GSK environment or even at a vendor location or with our CMOs or CRO, for example, everything now has to be done remotely. And that's the technology that actually have enabled us to actually continue with those. And true enough that we were able to actually hit those milestones and actually have some approvals for some key oncology drugs last year and this year on this. So which is fantastic, I think, for our businesses to be able to achieve that despite the challenges that we have faced. So I think that those were just, I think the use cases will just continue to expand from here. From time to time, people will come to us and ask, can I use it for this purpose? Can I use it for that purpose? It's more on really just going to grow, I think, from what we have started or where we have started.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Sulin. So again, for the folks that aren't familiar as much with life sciences on the call, the tech transfer process is massive. And more than that, the timelines are wildly critical because, as Sulin just mentioned, it directly impacts these oncology drugs which are coming to market. And if it's not transferred on time, if it doesn't happen successfully, I mean, it directly relates speed to market. And so it's something that is incredibly impactful. And I know every person on this call went through a tech transfer or two last year. And so thank you for that, Sulin. So Noble, do you also want to share, how this all of a sudden got rolled out, some of the learnings of it, and then really the use cases and some of the success stories that BMS had, because it got rolled out all over the world last year as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone else on this panel really alluded to a lot of the hardships and the difficulties that we had in implementing this technology, whether it's the infrastructure of a building, looking at Wi-Fi, whether it's training, whether it's getting site acceptance or IT acceptance. A lot of these were things that we all had to really go through and dive down and look from the business side, where as an end user or a business user, we just think, oh, if we have the technology, we can just wear it and we're good to go. However, there's all those things in the background, where you're using it. You could have Wi-Fi in a certain facility, but what type of Wi-Fi is it? What's the connection? Just because there is Wi-Fi doesn't mean it can be enabled to handle a stream video, where we had areas where we would try it and the video was pixelated. You could barely hear the person on the other line. Yes, there's Wi-Fi, but it wasn't that right signal. So, I mean, it's the constant back and forth, and then seeing and working on thinking ahead of what could work. And that was something that we had to go through, whether it was at the site that I'm normally at in New Jersey in the United States, or collaborative sites, whether it's in Boston area, Seattle, or around the world in Europe, or some of our external partners in Asia. And working with IT was a big part of the process, where you want to understand what their needs are in looking at the tech, the idea of how the data is encrypted and kept integrated within the technology itself. And then when we look to deploy it to external partners, now it's them who don't have the expertise in the technology or know what it is. So now it's us talking to their IT team, trying to get acceptance to use the technology at their facility. And then who knows what their Wi-Fi status is. We've had a lot of instances where we had to work with their IT to get basic Wi-Fi infrastructure in certain labs or certain manufacturing environments. And that took a lot of time. So we could send the devices within 2 weeks, within a week, but then all the things that have to happen in the background took a lot of time. And with this whole idea of COVID, it did expedite a lot of these timelines, and we were able to obtain a lot of success where the business really saw the benefit of this technology. And that's why we were able to grow the amount of devices that we had, double or triple the amount, where it's way outside my realm. And we've leveraged the work that my group has done with IT and helped enable other groups where they didn't have to go through the same hurdles, since we were able to overcome some of those initial ones. And it's allowed a lot of collaborative work, whether it's the idea of just having your eyes and ears in a process, being able to provide virtual training, being able to connect with vendors when they're not able to go on site and repair equipment, even going as far as performing virtual tours, and being able to show how you're able to capture data and things of that nature. The use cases started to balloon because once these certain groups saw how good the technology is for just remote collaboration, now the question comes back, what else can we do? What else can we provide? And there's a lot of creative people in BMS and all the companies that are here as panelists that want to think outside of the box and say, let's do X, Y, and Z. Let's use this technology for more than just remote collaboration. Remote collaboration was one of the quick wins, as you can say, even though we know that there was a lot of hurdles, but now expanding it and going through the process of getting more of these features unlocked is essential moving forward.
And that is a perfect segue with the last 4 minutes to go here, which is what's next, because I think all of you here on the call took out immense success out of last year and have continued to do so because, we're not out of COVID yet. We're all still at home, all of us here, except for Zach. I'm very jealous of Zach. But the rest of us are all still at home, because we are still working through this as our industry is the one helping at a humanity level scale get back to work and get back to normal. So with the last few minutes, we'll just do a rapid fire of what's next. What's next, and where do you see this going? Because we at Apprentice have a clear strategic objective as a company to create a lasting impact from COVID to cancer. Because we really believe that this COVID thing is ending, and it's on behalf of the life science industry of why it is. But more than that, we're turning our focus even internally to the next fight, which I believe many of you on the call are going to help us, again, at a humanity level scale achieve. It goes well beyond Apprentice's small little micro part in this thing. So what is next? And we'll just do a quick rapid fire just to wrap up here in the last 3 minutes. And so, Joe, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, I think what's next? We saw the FDA just last month publish guidelines on remote audits. So they've certainly taken an interest in how to push the industry to take advantage of this. So it's unlikely to replace site audits, but it will be used in tandem with this, to Douglas and many of the others' points around travel time. So making sure that we can do this faster and parallel process as much as possible. So that's certainly next. And we're piloting the technology in our operation suites as well to make sure that we can enable electronic batch manufacture. So that's just some of the stuff to come.
That's awesome. And Zach, for those of you on call that aren't familiar with Elevate, Elevate is doing personalized medicine and cell and gene therapy, which is a radically different manufacturing process than days of old. So Zach, I'll let you talk about what's next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so the most important thing is I've been here about 3 weeks now, and we're going to launch a POC with Apprentice immediately because we had such success with them at Sanofi that we've got to get this technology in here and in the hands of these people here as well. So that's the quick win for us. But I agree. It's training, it's audits, it's tech transfers, especially tech transfers with different buildings, building out the process in one site and being able to share it across other sites. That's the future with this technology, and it's not going away, and it's not just because of COVID. And this COVID instance really helped push it forward and push it over the line. We all knew it was possible, but now we had to do it. And so here we are, and it's going to stay.
Awesome. Douglas?
Yeah, really quick. I know we're out of time. So, we look at what we did with the remote collaboration and the tandem, as setting the foundation, right? Because it was the simplest way to make sure that we could do the basic things, driving that experience on the shop floor. From there, the rest of our strategic vision is now going to kick in, which includes things like guided task execution, right? So now can you live stream dedicated videos to show someone in real time how to do a specific activity at that point in time as they're doing the job, right? So it just opens up, a host of other, industry 4.0 type capabilities that we want to start driving on the shop floor.
Awesome. And then Sulin?
Yep, similarly, I think for us, also moving into the next phase is looking at augmented workflow. So how can we actually augment how operators are doing their work today, provide them with a more specific and visual instructions at the point that they need it, with hands-free if they need to, or if not with tablets. So I think that is going to be the next phase for us to move into.
That's great. And then last but certainly not least, to end the webinar here, Noble, take us home.
Yeah, so I mean, everything that we talked about previously with remote telepresence, just video for real-time training, real-time troubleshooting, tech transfers, audits, everything is something that various departments in BMS are looking into. And then the next level is the idea that Sulin mentioned, the data capture part, following procedures and workflows where not just you just don't have just a SOP that's with text, but you have accompanying images, you have accompanying video where people can get a full feel of what these steps are and be able to actually input data or provide data, whether it's through a picture or voice to text and various things like that. It's the next generation that we're trying to make it easier for the end user to be able to input this data. We're not trying to add cumbersome steps. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for that next stage.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you all on behalf of everyone here at Apprentice. And frankly, I'll speak for everyone outside of this industry. Thank you all for the work that you've done for all of us and our families at home. This has been an absolutely great webinar, and I can't appreciate enough how much time you guys have spent with this. I hope for the folks listening in, you've got to learn quite a bit here from the industry leaders who have been truly visionary. Every single person on this call has been truly visionary in terms of how we can leverage new technology to push this industry forward faster. And hopefully you've heard a lot of those things from today's conversation, and I'm really excited to meet many of you back in person. Hopefully, Joe, I can drive on over to Somerset and see you again, or maybe get a drink. But I appreciate all of you, and thank you all. And Morgan, we're happy to wrap up here. But thanks, everybody. Stay safe. And on behalf of everybody at Apprentice, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.